Our next keynote speaker are born and raised in Taiwan. He is currently an associate professor at the Department of Social Work at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. His research aims to contribute to the theoretical and practical knowledge of school violence and cyberbullying in Chinese societies and other countries to help design effective intervention strategies and policies to elevate school violence and bullying. In addition, he has been invited by non-governmental organizations, legislators, and governments to consult on strategies and policies concerning anti-violence measures in schools in Chinese societies. He is an associate professor of social work at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Please welcome Ji-Kang Chen with a warm applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming this keynote speech sessions. My name is Ji-Kang Chen. I was born and grew up in Taiwan. I also earned a bachelor degree in Taiwan. And then I went to United States for my MSW and PhD degree in social work. Then I joined Chinese University of Hong Kong. Now I'm currently Associate Professor of Department of Social Work at Chinese University of Hong Kong. Today, my keynote speech title is School Violence Among Adolescents in Chinese Society, a comparative study of Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. Over decades, Chinese people have mainly resided in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Chinese mainland. People residing in this society share the same cultural values, that is Chinese cultures. However, each society has its own political, economic, and educational and social welfare systems. For example, Taiwan has adopted a Western democratic system. Chinese mainland is a socialist society with a people's democratic dictatorships. Hong Kong is one of the most capitalist society in the world. In terms of education, Taiwan is highly influenced Japanese education systems, and Hong Kong is highly influenced by UK education systems, and Chinese mainland is highly influenced by the traditional Chinese education systems. In terms of social welfare systems, Hong Kong is more capitalist social welfare systems, and Chinese mainland is more socialist, and Taiwan is a between. The contextual differences between these three Chinese societies raise a research questions. Are correlates, outcomes, and patterns of school violence among adolescents similar or different among diverse Chinese society? In the past years, I have conducted series of study in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Chinese mainland in order to answer these research questions. I have collected cross-sectional and longitudinal data from Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland. I also adopted equivalent sampling strategy and equivalent measurement to collect data. The major sampling strategy that I use is cluster random sampling methods. My data includes multiple reports from students, teachers, parents, and peer nominations. Today, I select some of my study to share with you about the major findings to the research questions. Study 1, Behavior Ranking Order of School Violence Among Chinese Society. It has been argued that the contextual differences in political, economic, and education system among Chinese society may lead to different behavior ranking order of school violence and bullying among Chinese societies. However, some scholars believe that behavior ranking order should be similar and not influenced by such contextual differences. However, there has been no evidence to support either propositions mentioned in last slide. Thus, I conducted rational analysis to rank school violence perpetrating and victimized behavior from most to least common in each society and compare the similarities and differences in the behavior ranking orders. This is the results. This table shows that behavior ranking order of the school violence perpetrating behavior in 3 Chinese society. Here, you can see this column. This column, I list the school violence perpetrating behavior that I survey in 3 Chinese society. And this column, it shows that logic scores based on the Rashi analysis. Based on these logic scores, we can assert the ranking order in Chinese society. Here, ranking number one means that this behavior is the most common in Chinese society. Number two means the second common in this Chinese society. And number three means that this is the third common. And number 12, that means that this is the least common behavior in this society. So you can see that, interestingly, in the all Chinese society, and also in Hong Kong and mainland and Taiwan, the top 3 common school violence perpetrating behavior is cursing, mocking, insulting, humiliating, seizing, pitching, pushing, and shoving. And when we look at this kind of ranking orders, you can find that the behavior ranking order in Hong Kong, in mainland China, in Taiwan, they show similar ranking order. This table shows school violence victimized behavior. Again, this column is the list of the victimized behavior that I survey in 3 Chinese society. And this ranking order is all 3 Chinese society, the behavior ranking order. Again, the ranking number 1 means that this is the most common behavior in this society. And 12 means that this is the least common in this Chinese society. So you can find that the top 4 common victimized behavior are very similar between Hong Kong, mainland China, and Taiwan. They are the same. The top 4 school victimized behavior are being cursed, being mocked, insulted, humiliated, being seized, pinched, pushed, shoved, and being gossiped or said bad things about. And we can observe the behavior ranking order between these 3 Chinese society. We can easily find that the behavior ranking order are very similar between Chinese society. I also conduct the candles rank correlations. The correlations show that the rank order correlation between society is significant. Here, I present the results. And you can find that no matter perpetrating behavior, victimized behavior, the ranking orders are very similar, are significant between society. That means that behavior ranking orders tends to be similar between these 3 diverse Chinese society. So what's the study one tell us? The findings suggest that behavior ranking order of school violence tend to be similar between society. These findings show that contextual differences may not work in influencing behavior ranking order of school violence across Chinese society. Study 2, clarifying the causal effect relationship between school violence and its correlations. I have conducted several studies to examine causal effect relationship between school violence and its correlates in Chinese society. I also have compared how these causal effect relationships are similar or different between society. Taking one of my study as an example. In the study, I asked the questions, is school engagement a predictor or an outcome of the school victimization in Chinese society? Why I ask this kind of questions? Because there is theoretical debate. For example, school bonding theories argue that students who have low-level school engagement are more likely to experience more school violence. However, trauma theories argue that students who experience more school violence are more likely to have a low level of school engagement. Very interesting. These two theories, when they discuss the association between school engagement and school victimization, their prediction is very different. And also very interestingly, previous study examining the association between school engagement and school victimization. Most of these studies, they were conducted in cross-sectional data. As a result, the potential causal effect association between school engagement and school victimization still remain unclear, particularly in Chinese society. So, using a longitudinal data with 9-month intervals, I conducted cross-leg analysis to examine and compare the potential causal effect association between school engagement and school victimization in Chinese society. Here is the results of a cross-leg analysis. And you can find that there is the two variables that major in Taiwan, in wave 1. These two variables is the school engagement and school victimization. And there are also two variables measured at Tai 2 or wave 2. These two variables is school engagement and also school victimization. In this study, school engagement, we collect teachers' reports about the school engagement for each students. And school victimization, we collect data from student informations. And in this model, you can easily find that the school victimization at Taiwan at wave 1 cannot successfully predict the school engagement at wave 2. And by contrast, school engagement at wave 1 can successfully predict the school victimization at wave 2. And here, I list the regression coefficients for these three Chinese society. And you can find that regression coefficients for these three Chinese society are very similar and also significant. That means that the wave 1 school engagement prediction to school victimization at wave 2, this kind of effects, predicting effects, are very similar between each society. So what's the findings tell us? The findings suggest that school engagement is an important predictor rather than outcomes of school victimization in each Chinese society. Increasing school engagement may be a key element in the future intervention program to reduce school victimization in Chinese society. I have also conducted other studies to clarify the temporal or causal effect relationship between school victimization and its correlate, such as psychological distress, parental punishment, sleep problem, and so on. Generally speaking, this study showed that the correlates and outcome of school violence are very similar across society. Study 3, identify the psychosocial mechanism in the relationship between school violence and its correlates. In addition to clarify correlates of the school violence in each society, I have also tried to identify the potential psychosocial mediating factors in the association between school violence and its correlates. For example, Benveniste and Archer propose a model of social, ecological, and school influence on school violence and argue that school violence perpetration is influenced by a combination of personal, family, school, and community risk factor. Particularly, Benveniste and Archer, they argue that school variable can mediate the effects of the personal, family, and community risk factor on school violence. So far, it's not clear how Benveniste and Archer models is relevant to each Chinese society. It is also not clear how school variable can mediate the effects of personal, family, and community risk factor on school violence, and whether the mediating mechanism of the school variable are similar or different between Chinese society. So based on Benveniste and Archer models, I propose a theoretical model. I plan to examine this proposed theoretical model in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland. According to the Benveniste and Archer model, they argue that the family factor, such as negative psychological characteristics, family factors such as family functions, community factors such as community victimization, this variable can directly influence school violence perpetration. In terms of school violence perpetration, it can be divided into the two forms. The one form is that student violence against their peers. The second form is that student violence against their teachers. So, according to the Benveniste and Archer, they argue that these variables, negative psychological characteristics, family function, and community victimization has direct impact on student violence against students and student violence against teachers. Particularly, they argue that school variables such as school engagement, affiliate with delinquent peers, teacher-child relationship could be mediate the association between this variable and school violence perpetrations. So, these proposed models, I plan to examine the proposed model in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. And this model, I use a longitudinal study to examine. This is the results for 3 Chinese society. And you can see that, very interestingly, negative psychological characteristics, family functions, community victimization has very weakly associated with student violence against their peers and student violence against teachers. And also, particularly, our model suggests that school engagement, affiliate with delinquent peers, teacher-child relationship could mediate the association between negative psychological characteristics, family function, community victimization, and school violence perpetrations. And here, I also show the regression coefficient for each society. You can find that blue color denotes regression coefficient for Taiwan. White color denote regression coefficient for Hong Kong. Red color denote regression coefficients for mainland China. And you can see that the regression coefficient for each path is very similar between three Chinese society. So what's the findings tell us? The findings suggest that school factors such as school engagement, affiliation with delinquent peers, and teacher-child relationship play an important mediating role in the links from personal, family, and community factors to school violence in three Chinese society. The pattern of the relationship between verbal and mediational mechanisms are very similar among society. Most importantly, different from previous studies stressing how personal trait and family experience directly influence school violence. These studies provide evidence that school environment or school experiences is an important developmental settings contributing to school violence both directly and indirectly in Chinese society. That means that improving students' school experiences could show a strong effectiveness to reduce school violence in each Chinese society. In addition to Babinishi and Arthur model, I also use social support deterioration model as a framework to examine how different sources of perceived social support in adolescents' daily life, such as parent support, teacher support, and peer support, mediate the effects of the school victimization on depression in three Chinese society. Here, I show that what social support deterioration model talks about. Social support deterioration model argue that there is a direct link from school victimization to depressions. Particularly, social support deterioration model argue that perceived social support, such as perceived social support from parents, from teachers, from peers, play a very important mediating roles between school victimization and depressions. That means that social support deterioration model argue that students who experience more school violence are more likely to perceive less social support from parents, teachers, and peers, and which in turn increase the chance of suffering depressions. So based on the social support deterioration models, I propose a theoretical model, and I plan to examine this proposed model in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. And this model, you can find that perceived social support, teacher support, and peer support play a mediating role between school victimization and depressions. Here, this is the results for the proposed theoretical model. In this model, you can see that the school victimization has very weak and almost non-significant association with depressions. And most importantly, you can find that perceived parent support, teacher support, and peer support play a very mediating role between school victimization and depressions. Most importantly, you can find that perceived parent support play a more mediating roles in the association between school victimization and depression than teacher support and peer support. And you can find that regression coefficient for each society show they are very similar among Chinese society. So what the finding tell us? The finding suggests that different sources of perceived social support can play an important mediating role in the relationship between school victimization and depression in Chinese society. And also, perceived parent support is the stronger mediator than peer and teacher support in our model. The pattern of relationship between variables and mediational mechanism of social support are similar among Chinese society. So this study suggests that increasing students' perception of social support, particularly parental support, may help preventing victims suffering from depression in Chinese society. Such intervention strategy may show equivalent effectiveness in Chinese society. So what's we learn from these three Chinese society studies? From these studies, the finding suggests that behavior ranking order correlates outcomes and psychosocial mediating mechanisms are very similar between society in these studies. And it also seems that contextual differences between society may not significantly influence correlates outcomes of school violence and psychosocial mediating mechanism of certain factor in school violence. Perhaps in the future, similar or same intervention strategy and policy may be considered in Chinese society to tackling school violence. This is my presentation. Thank you very much.